So we actually have a variety of programs for the Esports Association. One is career readiness. So we actually work with the Career Center here to better prepare our association members to learn those life skills that they are going to need so that when they make that transition over to a career pathway.
Awesome, awesome. This guy, we gotta turn around. This guy wins almost every tournament we throw. I'm telling you. You gotta watch him live. He's gonna be something big, I'm telling you.
CSUDH Esports Association is centered in 4 domains: academics and research, community engagement, competition, and entertainment.
We're trying to make sure that the students are prepared for the future, that they understand the diversity that media offers now, and again, look beyond the traditional outlets.
They can gain fieldwork, partnerships, as well as potential job opportunities and in both the higher education and K-12 fields.
We believe that esports is a strategy and not an outcome. Our association is here to help anyone that is willing to learn how to take your gaming skills to the next level through a supporting community. If you are looking to showcase your production talents to help support our esports teams, then this is the association for you. We host online and on-site tournaments that will allow our members to showcase their competitive spirit. Our association broadcasts out our competition and practices to entertain our community as well as our global audience. We believe that by joining us, you will come out of the association feeling transformed and better prepared to transfer your skills into your career. Join today and begin to explore endless opportunities through our Esports Association here at Cal State Dominguez Hills. All right, welcome everyone to another esports talk session here at Cal State Dominguez Hills. We are excited and delighted to introduce to you all our special guest that we have in store for you. But before we do any introduction, I just want to quickly share some announcements. And that is, we want to thank you, those that are viewing, those that are supporting us, to continue to support us in many different ways that you guys already find us to do the work that we're able to do. We have various socials on our channel. Feel free to follow them, leave feedback. We thrive through all of that. We also do want to share that all of our streams we are dedicating to the Extra Life Foundation. So if you feel the need to donate in any way in our Twitch channel below, we actually have a place for you to do that. So without any further ado, we have Jourdan Saunders joining us today. She is the CEO and founder of the Resource Key. And this topic is the Resource Key Edition. So Jourdan, welcome.
Thank you so much. I feel honored to have this edition of the Resource Key. So exclusive feeling.
Good.
I always like to start out though with a visual description, just in case there's any needs of anyone that is blind that is viewing, or anyone that has their video turned off. I feel like it's always a nice way to start. So I am a Black woman. I am wearing my hair in a high bun. I have a black hoodie with white fleece lining, and I'm wearing a gold necklace with a key and a lock. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Gosh, thank you, Jourdan. That's awesome. I mean, I love how you just shared that right now and describing, and it just leads me to how we want to dive into this and just get to know a little bit about your background. Please, if you don't mind sharing us, what is it that you do at the Resource Key, and if you can share to our community.
Yeah, definitely. So at the Resource Key, I have a background in speech language pathology. And one of the things, how I came up with the resource key, how it came about was fact of I worked with so many different clients over the years, no matter how young or old they were. And I observed as well as listened to them, and it was the lack of feeling included in the community. So, give you an example, I went to one of my clients and we were out in the community at a restaurant, and the waitress was talking to his spouse instead of talking directly to him. And so that was, it's very frustrating, you know, if for someone that's out in the community, to be almost like looked down on or feel like you don't have a voice even though you're able to talk. So my client was in a wheelchair, and so a lot of times my client would describe like how when he's out in the community someone talks to like his spouse instead of talking directly to him. And that's just like one example out of many. And so with the resource key, it's really just using branding as a tool to be able to bridge the gap to bring about social change, and social change in terms of more inclusive branding, and making sure the priority at the resource key is making sure people with disabilities are included and making meaningful connections with brands. So we work directly with businesses to make sure that you know, inclusive branding. So it's a digital inclusive agency that is able to provide, you know, the social media inclusion, whether it's, you know, the visual that you see or the behind the scenes with the accessibility piece. So inclusion and accessibility are super important, and that's the priorities at the resource key.
Gosh, that's amazing. You know, I commend you for all the work and truly highly needed. And I love what you just shared too. It's the way to incorporate the branding, right? I think you hear a lot of times branding is everything for any organization. Well, making sure that you're having, you know, an inclusive plan in your branding should be amongst the top of the priority list. And I love that, you know, you get to do that through the resource key and being able to help organizations accomplish that. So it leads me to actually a question that I had one of our students reach out and share a little bit more. And they asked, you know, what kind of credentials or education did you have to obtain to essentially do this line of work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I got my master's degree and also to my bachelor's degree in speech language pathology. And, you know, maybe it's changed now, but when I was going to school, it was more of a medical model in terms of how we were trained. You don't really look at the social model of things, I feel like, until you get out into the field and you're actually, you know, working with clients. I had a lot of wonderful opportunities where I was able to go out into the community with my clients. So that's not always the case with every position, you know. So sometimes I worked in the school districts, and you're not necessarily always going out into the community to see some of these experiences that, you know, someone may face on a daily basis. And I think that's super important, you know. So my schooling was like more technical and more medically based, but for me, like going out to community was like the eye opener for me, and to be able to utilize what I heard from my clients first and foremost, and then what I also observed. But in terms of like the background, I don't have a marketing background. You know, mine is more from the clinical side as a speech language pathologist. So the marketing background, I didn't go to school for marketing. It was kind of just like I saw this need, and marketing, branding, I feel like those are things that you can kind of get into without like necessarily having a specific like credentials. It like helps for sure, but there's like the branding that you do on a personal level and the branding that you may do for a business level. So I feel like it's something that you can get into without specifically having those credentials. You know, like I have taken classes and gone to like some virtual workshops and things like that, just for more of those detail side of things. But I didn't get my degree in that. So
No, no, thank
That
you
would
for
be.
sharing. Yeah, yeah, and I think you're
Mhm.
absolutely right. And it kind of speaks to the notion of, you can really dive into many of these fields as long as you know that there is a area of pain or there's a discovered a problem
Yeah.
that can really be something useful. In the way it's positioned, there's different ways to essentially learn and grasp and also learn exemplars to what you see. But that's really neat that in essence, it didn't stop you, is what I'm hearing. It's like,
No, I'm the type of person, anyone that knows me,
yep.
I see like if there's something that needs to be done and I'm able to at some level, get it done, or if I have to bring in other people to get it done, that's just kind of who I've always been, and like the actionable items that have to get done. Like, okay, so we have this, like no doesn't stop me too many times. Like I love like hearing no because I feel like I'm getting closer to yes. And so like whatever I have to do to align, whether it's, using my expertise or aligning with others, like we're getting it done, and so I think I should like rewind to say like, you see like what's on a resume, or you can look at my different pages that I have, or the resume or my bio. But I think there's a lot of like back end stuff that I think is just as important that you don't see as much. So for me, I've always kind of like gone for it, and my parents were always super supportive in my family.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
like growing up, I remember getting my first job at like 16
Uh-huh,
as
uh-huh.
an after school assistant. So I always just like loved kids. I loved teaching. I just felt like I would, you know, teach to my like stuffed animals when I was like a little kid.
No way.
Yeah, like lining them up, and
That's
you're just
so.
like, okay, you're gonna do this, this, and this. And I also was I did competitive gymnastics for many years. So like I would pretend like I'm their like the stuffed animals coach. And I'm like, okay, you have to like straight arms, all of these different things.
Um,
But so anyways, I'm saying that all to say, like I did after school assistant for a community program. I did some acting as like a extra. Let's see, modeling. I was Jet Beauty and Jet. I don't even think they have it anymore, but it was like Beauty of the Week. I did that, and I was a summer camp counselor. I was a funeral home funeral home receptionist, gymnastics coach, cheerleading coach, fitness instructor, cheerleading coach, tutor. So I've done like a lot of things over the years. And when I was in college, literally, I would finish school, go, coach gymnastics for like an hour or two, and then go wait tables at a restaurant that I was working at. And then maybe like the next day I would go, and I was like a funeral home receptionist. So I mean, talk
yeah,
about like the variety of different jobs.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Jordan, you've done it all, and it's so true.
Yeah.
With the college students' schedule too, it typically looks like that. Working
Yeah.
jobs, in some cases, full-time student, very
Yeah.
difficult, but you're juggling. But it's part of the growing experience of
Mhm.
adulthood. uh,
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's like when you graduate from high school, or like you're preparing to go to high school and you're trying to figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life. I always felt like it was just like, what do you mean? Like, what do you I don't know. Like I'm trying to figure out like what I want to do for like the next day, let
yeah,
alone the
yeah,
rest of my life. So it's always funny, and I'm sure people can relate out there, like how you get into a field. A lot of times for my field, it was like speech language pathology. 9 times out of 10, not a lot of people knew about the field itself.
mm,
So it may be like, oh, I had a brother or like a sister that has a disability, and I'm really like passionate about like making a change, and I want to. That's how I went into the field of speech pathology. Or for me, it was my aunt is a speech language pathologist,
mm,
and I was coaching gymnastics at the time. And one of the gymnasts that I coach, her brother had a disability, and the parent was like so kind enough to allow me to like shadow. Another, person said they like looked at their friends, like what they were going to major in, and that's how they chose, what field they wanted to go in. So we don't really have this like concrete, I think, idea of what we sometimes want to go into, because, and maybe some people do. For me, I started out in elementary education and then shifted into speech language pathology, and that was because I love working with children, but I didn't want to be confined to the classroom because I knew my personality was, well, you can probably tell from just like all the different jobs that I like having the option of being able to, see what's out there and see how I can utilize my background in like different creative ways. So I think that's important, just to not like get stuck so much in like, this is what I have to like
Right.
devote my like life to for the rest of my life because I've picked this field. I think it's just like being open to, oh, okay, I can utilize my background in this field that I've chosen to be able to do this, this, and this.
Right. Yeah, and I was going to say that's awesome, Jordan. I mean, so true. During that time, that's the part of the exploration stage, right? You
Mm-hmm.
explore to see what are the opportunities out there as you gravitate to knowing who you are as a person too, to see what
Yeah.
this will be like. Will you like doing what you're doing, I don't know, 10 years from now?
Mm-hmm.
And even just what you're doing now, because you're not necessarily in just one industry, you're really in multiple industry, to share this common importance of, hey, let's build these inclusive brands. What you thought you started before maybe didn't have this thought of, hey, did we think of everyone, right? Or did
Yeah.
we think about, our full population or full potential, really, when the brand was created? And perhaps in those boardroom meetings, perhaps they weren't being had, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
why we're here today. And so, if you could, Jourdan, maybe maybe you can share a little bit about some of the process and what it is that you do to discover this, and maybe it's an exercise that you do with other organizations. But how do you start noticing the key need criterias from an industry that's asking for your help, or a client that's asking you for some help?
Yeah. So, with inclusion, diversity, equity, all of these different terms that we use,
Mhm.
I think there's a certain mindset that kind of goes along with it. At the core of it are people, everyday people like, myself, you, whoever is joining us. And I think it's really challenging sometimes because a lot of times, companies want these structured systems of like, how do I go about like implementing this? And it's like, for me, I see it as just like everyday basic things, that happen. And if you're not at a certain place or a certain mindset, um, you're not ready necessarily for like the services that I'm providing. And it's not to sound like I'm better than anyone else, or like the resource key like, won't take on like everyone, but it's just like a certain mindset that businesses have to have in order to be open to these initiatives, because it's not just, I'm going to provide a training or a handbook and then you're checking off like, okay, we had this like Jourdan and the resource key come in and provide these like services. We're being more diverse, we feel like, in our social media, and okay, that's it, like we've done it. It's not about that. Like I feel like at the core of all of this are people, and there's certain basic things that have to be in place in order for inclusion, diversity, equity, all of these initiatives to take place. And it's bigger than just a handbook or a training. So there's a certain mindset, there's a certain, like I have a like an overview, like I'm able to go through and kind of, just see like where, just through a lot of research, like I'm definitely a researcher, and to see, and like usually if I'm pitching to clients, then it's like a certain client that I'm pitching to that has a mindset that I think that they're ready for like more and to be more, inclusive, diverse. And I think a lot of this too is like there's accessibility piece that is often left out of this equation. And so when we think about access, accessibility, these are all different terms that are used, but it kind of depends on the context that you're using them. So for example, with everything being virtual and schools being online, access, let's look at access in terms of do students have access to the internet to be able to, do the schoolwork or whatever they need to get done. Accessibility in terms of if someone is blind, are they able to access the website that you're using to provide the schoolwork? So accessibility, like all these different terms are used differently. So I think we have to take a look at that as well, because that is just as important when we're talking about inclusion, diversity, equity. It's kind of, included in that, even though we may not talk about it because it's, DEI or diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility has to be a part of the equation as well. So there's a few things that I look at, when I am looking at potential clients to work with. But honestly, a lot of times clients will reach out to me. I'm super active on LinkedIn, as Ruben knows. So I probably end up in, like, if you're on LinkedIn and you're following me, or if you're a friend, I end up in probably people's feeds every day, just because probably the algorithm, I post every like 20 minutes, it feels like. But anyway, so there's a certain messaging that I have, and it's like a serious messaging. It's like, are you serious about this? Because it's not just implementing something to say you've done it. It's like, these are people's lives. It's livelihood. There's respect. There's empathy. There's all of these different things that we sometimes fail to realize when we're trying to roll out a initiative. So I think that's like the long version of kind of what I look for, what clients typically are. I'm not just taking on every single client, because every single business is not ready yet. Right. And I'm okay with that. I'd rather, like, there has to be like a certain point where you're ready and like truly ready, because it's not just going to be like a quarterly thing that you're doing. This is going to be an ongoing thing. Inclusion, diversity, equity, this is like an ongoing thing. It's not just rolling out a campaign and then that's it. So that would be my answer to that.
No, thank you for sharing that. And it's such a great way to elaborate, because it's so true. When you said earlier, it's not like it's a one-time campaign and it just goes away.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have, like you said earlier, the mindset, but it's just teaches you the practices of being intentional, right? Like, we are going to make intentional efforts, but we know that this isn't just, a spurt of energy. It's going to take all of us. And it sounds like in order to be in that mindset, you really have to have that culture immersed in that organization. Mm-hmm. And it obviously starts from the leadership to hopefully help the organization move forward so that it essentially stays, right? And to embrace whatever new challenges come forth, because we can't always predict the future, but we can at least prepare for steps in this direction that gives us the inclusivity understanding of, hey, we are very mindful of the space, and we may not have the answer now, but we are working on something like that so that we can always start striving for that. But like you said, it is a mindset. And I think you shared it so eloquently. So thank you, Jourdan. That really brought a lot into perspective. Shifting gears just a little bit now, if we could talk about the industry specific, being that it's gaming, esports. I'm sure there's a lot of gamers out there that are listening in, and those that are, very active in the casual world or competitive world. But share with us, if you could, Jourdan, like some key ways that we can start embedding some more inclusivity practices. If you're you know, if you're a student that's looking to start an association, or you're active in one, or you're playing competitively in another, I mean, there's an array of, ways to actually be involved into the esports and gaming spaces. But if you could, Jourdan, maybe enlighten us if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. You see, I have my gaming chair.
Yeah. Yes, I love
I'm a true gamer.
Yeah.
I'm I feel like Ruben has his like whole like setup, microphone and all. Anyway, so yeah, so from the gosh, there's gaming, I feel like there's such an opportunity for anyone who's listening to be able to embed like inclusion in this. And it can be from like actionable items that you can do today or tomorrow, all the way to like bigger initiatives. So I would say for me, like I can think of, in the gaming space, Able Gamers is incredible organization for like aligning accessibility. There's so many different ones. I think British Esports has like an incredible list of different organizations within the gaming industry, and they have it outlined by like their scope of action. So like, is this organization more aligned with like gender diversity or global inclusion, ethics, accessibility? So there's all of these different things. So it's kind of up to you in terms of the space that you're interested in terms of moving inclusion forward. And I think just there's so many different things, inclusion in the aspect of just even when you're, chatting on games, there's that piece of, I feel like gaming has a space for everyone. And I wouldn't, you all are probably like bigger gamers than me. I've played Fortnite by way of my husband's cousins teaching me. I've picked a skin. I think that's probably my favorite part, and floated out of the parachute. And then after that, I'm like confused about what to do next. But I grew up playing like Super Mario Brothers and Mortal Kombat and all of those different classic games that I grew up on. Thanks to my brother, because he like would convince me first that we needed to get video games like for Christmas, and then it would end up like in his room and I would play in his room. But I like Super Mario Brothers, Mortal Kombat, and a few other games. Anyway, so I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for anyone that's listening to align yourself with gaming, and just like the inclusion factor of it. So you can align yourself with organizations. You can reach out to organizations, say, hey, I'm interested in aligning myself with your organization. How can I, contribute? Whether it's writing an article, or maybe you're speaking from your perspective of how you see inclusion, moving forward even more within the gaming space. So there's so many different ways, especially now with everyone being pretty much at home, online more. There's so many opportunities, even though it may not feel like it, because we're so used to in-person meetups. I would say just like reach out. Like I always am a firm believer of finding like the head of whoever it is of the marketing department, or whatever it may be, and then work your way down or whatnot. But definitely have something actionable that you feel that would be just like an actionable item. Like, where do you feel like you see yourself being able to provide a space for inclusion, or where do you see your skill set coming into place? Because gaming, it's an industry, like this is an industry that is taking off. There's so much overlap. I look at education and how the value in esports and the connection of education, and how you can learn so many different skills, problem solving, different skills related, conversational skills, different ways of leadership. There's like leadership in esports. There's different things that I've observed just through my husband's cousins playing, and also to some of my students that I previously worked with. Even though I may not understand every aspect of it, I was always willing to listen. And there's a way that you can create those connections too, like with learning, or with different industries to be able to move forward, inclusion, whatever it may be. But I think you just have to find that, like, the intersection of where things meet. So like, what do you like? um what is the industry, or what is the company that you're reaching out to? What are their values? What are some of the things that they value? What are some of the things that they're doing? And then where is like the happy medium in between? So I think that's like super important, and I think that's something that you can do tomorrow if you wanted to.
Yeah, gosh, I love it.
Yeah.
I just want to reiterate what you just shared. I mean, so many
Mhm.
powerful points right there, Jourdan. And the neat thing about even just going back into a little bit of the childhood mindset is, yeah, it's that it's, this is a space where kids like to dabble in, right? This
Yeah.
space that is high engagement, right? But even just hearing like your educator hat on, saying, hey,
I
we can tie those hard and soft skills
hmm
from that space of engagement. And then even for students to start thinking, wait a second, if I want to have a good time, which is what everybody typically wants to be in, what about my peer over there that
hmm
may not have the same, let's say, um, you know, you know, they may be struggling with some kind of challenging disability, right? And they're not necessarily involved. But even thinking of, hey, how can we think to bring more people so that it feels very inclusive and not, well, it's just too bad. That
Yeah.
will just lead to a trend of, well, it's just too bad as you get older. It cements that
Exactly.
thought. And if we could do that from the mindset of kids now to think, okay, no, we want everybody to be in this space because it feels like a culminating event when we're together, whether it's in person or online, which it almost feels like we're together even on this online platform because
Yeah.
games have evolved so much um, that it essentially starts enabling more inclusive talks. And the neat thing is that we're able to, as educators, incorporate that start changing the way our kids think, if you will, or just our future leaders are going to be thinking. So in
Yeah.
essence, everything you said was right on, and I love how you put those connection ties together because that's truly what the essence of the esports strategy, if you will, can essentially help infuse and start bringing in more other conversations to say, hey, we want to activate in this space. But
Yeah, and I think if you can think of it as even like, it can be different. There's different phases of everything, right? So you have the phase of like something's already created, and then you're aligning maybe with like an organization or industry with your skill set. Or you can think of it, there's companies that are on the ground and they're looking for people to be like user testers or like to help create. And you all, especially, like, I feel like everyone has such a different perspective. Sometimes when you're in spaces you get more into it and you may not see the bigger picture. So like there's room for that too, to be able to help with building, based on your expertise and maybe some of the things that you've experienced. Maybe you had have a friend of yours that has a disability and is not able to use the controller in the way to be able to play the game in the way that it's designed, or there's different things that could increase accessibility, or whatever it may be. You can like align with some of these companies that are creating, to you have expertise. It doesn't matter how young or old you are, there's expertise in everything, and you can think of yourself as like a builder to connect with these companies that are on the ground that like need people like yourself to be able to have that lens of like the big picture. Or you're in that space where you're gaming maybe every day, and you have a different lens than someone that's on the outside creating and is not necessarily gaming, they just have a great idea. So I think there's room too for that, to help develop and design products that are universal design and inclusive.
Yeah, right on. And it almost feels like too, and you mentioned this too earlier, Jourdan, you mentioned a great charity in the Able Gamers charity,
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
organization. It's almost like if you're interested,
Hmm.
especially for parents that are listening, that have kids that are gamers or are playing, to almost look into those charities and
Yeah.
even just do, I know we can't necessarily be in person, but maybe a virtual field trip and talk to the organization and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, take a look at who they're impacting, see what it is that you can do to be part of that space, because it takes that level uh, of movement in that direction to start feeling like, hey, I'm being more mindful of the space now, or I'm being more appreciative of what I have today,
Right.
so that I can help perhaps others get to that space so that I can be part of an experience. And you never know what it ignites. Like you just
Yeah.
mentioned, this invention that could essentially change the way one controls a controller, something as
Mm-hmm.
simple as that, that could be, life changing to many.
Yeah.
Um, it's almost like, I almost encourage, if not, I do encourage, I don't want to say almost, I encourage
Yeah.
all to take, those steps to hear these great organizations that are doing a lot of work in inclusivity,
Yeah.
that impact, the greater community, and at the same time, make it part of, the fabric of what your association is about. It never hurts to start questioning. And if you don't have it, like you said earlier, Jourdan, it's okay. Uh, it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some,
Yeah.
we can't be afraid of it, but it's going to be one of those things where at least you're dialoguing and now putting some plans of actions in place so that you get deeper into the understanding. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, right on. I definitely see the opportunity there for the industry. And quite honestly, if our students or our kids are the ones that are, entertained in that space, well, not only being the consumers, but start thinking about being the creators, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the resources that, are more made available as time pursues. But
Yeah. And there's so
awesome.
many contests that like, you
Yes.
can submit. And even if like you don't you don't hear back or they say no, like it's still kind of need to just go through that process and have that structure and to just, I don't know, it's exciting. Well, exciting to me, but
Yeah. No,
you all have to like
yeah. This is
maybe
coming
not the
from
writing part, like is not as exciting, but
this is coming from someone that says that if I get a no, I'm close to a yes. Which,
yeah,
if we could
exactly.
all adopt that model, I love it. That's going to be the Jourdan model. Such a good way to think about it too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To encourage and motivate. So I
Yeah,
love
and
it.
it builds like tough skin. Like you're just kind
It
of like,
does.
okay, you said no, that's okay, fine. That's okay.
Well, excellent, Jourdan. I mean, and so, I mean, share with us a little bit more too about, I know we mentioned earlier, about the branding, exclusivityness, and, share with us why, for those organizations that perhaps are maybe just starting, hey, we're about to start, what key, messages should an organization that's about to start should start thinking about first before diving in too deep, and then having to feel like they need to retreat back, thinking that they missed a big step when it comes to the inclusivity efforts and work that you are doing.
Yeah, I think there's so many different aspects of, like I said, diversity, inclusion, equity, accessibility, all of these things. So I think aligning, a lot of times when we create things, we start from what we're comfortable with or what we know. So I think kind of, starting there, of course, and then branching out. So cross collaboration is super important. There's all different terms that you may be familiar with, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, all these different terms that we may use. But I just say, cross collaborate or go outside of your comfort zone, because I think that is where you truly start to create and build more for looking forward to the future. Because ideally, it's you wanted to like include everyone. I know we have like a target audience, but ideally we don't want to leave anyone out. And I think when you collaborate with people who don't look like you, who don't have the same perspective, that may have different accessibility needs than you, just all of these different things. I think if you're just kind of going through and exhausting everything that's outside of yourself and outside of your comfort zone, I think that's like a really great start. Because like I said, a lot of times we build from what we know, what we're comfortable with, maybe within the same industry, and that's not necessarily sustainable, I don't think, for the future. I think it's even when we look at tech and just like I used to think, oh, like I'm not in the tech industry. I like don't really know like anything within the tech industry, but it's not necessarily that at this point. I think if we look at how with the pandemic happening, like everyone technically is in tech is overlap with your industry. If it wasn't previously, it probably is now. So like speech language pathology, it's like digital, everything's online. So like teletherapy and all of these different things. With school, everything's online. So there's these like overlaps that are happening, and they're happening a lot at a quicker pace than previously. So I think that's important when we're thinking about building a product or building anything. And also too, just like using your background, like even for me, I am a speech language pathologist, but I always like, and I think it may have to do too with like me doing so many different like jobs growing up. I always went to other conferences or industry conferences that were outside of my own, and that was because like I always know I can learn more, and I always know that like at some point we need to all be like connecting at some place because we get so stuck in like our industries, which is really great because you have the expertise, but it's important to have that like conversation with just like that everyday language, because not everyone is going to understand like the gaming language or like speech language pathology language or whatever it may be. So we have to have that commonality to be able to bridge everything together. And I think that's going to be important when we're building for the future, and for companies that are building a product now, it's going to be important. Like, how can you explain your product to someone that's not in the industry? How can you make sure that you're including pretty much like so that no one's getting left behind? Because a lot of this, like I said, is going to be in some form or fashion created into like the tech space, and we have to make sure that we're like aligning and cross collaborating with industries and people that don't look like us, people that don't have the same perspective. So that's what I would say.
Gosh, Jourdan, brilliant. I mean, it makes total sense in what I'm hearing, and even just hearing your practices too. It's go out of your comfort zone a little bit and start finding those dots to connect that maybe people are not seeing right now.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. If it's going to be cross, connecting, it's more of this idea of seeing where is it that where is that bridge? Where's that opportunity where we can actually start looking at, hey, I know you have a target audience, but in essence, we can't leave, certain people out because, quite frankly, we all need to be in the space because it's so infused with technology.
Yeah.
And tech, in some regards, have done a lot of good, but at the same time, not fully solved every problem, right? There's so much that continuously shows to improve and grow, and sometimes even in the studies, you're thinking, okay, where is the redirect here where we actually need to solve certain problems before we move forward with more innovations? But I mean, absolutely. And if I may ask, Jourdan, like, you mentioned earlier, you're a big researcher. What is it that you're looking for as you're researching, like that continuously informs your work, that you're finding opportunities and seeing, hey, where can I start, or how can you share with others to think, almost in a different lens of scope, to say, hey, look, there are ways for you to inform your practice, because there is so much movement that's happening that more and more industries are all going online because how the pandemic really sped up that process. What is it that you're specifically looking when you're researching?
Yeah. So kind of looking at a few different things. I'm looking at trends. So there's like different, news outlets and things like that I'm looking at, like trends that are happening. Even though, trends come and go sometimes, there is still some like research and things behind that, because it's something behind that in order for it to become a trend. So like we need to kind of like understand, for me, like I want to understand like why is this a trend? Why are people into this? And so then I go from there, and then I'm looking at like an underlying thing. Like what is the commonality between like all of these trends that are happening? So like from the big picture standpoint, when I look at just like things that are happening, so it's like things are happening quicker, things are happening, you you're wanting to be more efficient, right? Because things are happening at a quicker rate. We're wanting to be more efficient with different things. So a lot of the things that are happening that are trends sometimes are things that are going to make it easier for us to be able to get something done quicker, right? So like there's things like that that you may be looking at. So it's like a variety of different things. So I kind of look at, like, each week I have certain things that I'm looking at, and I'm looking at different industries, and then I'm looking at like, okay, what's the commonality between these things? So I'm tracking a lot of different things, just as like, if you would track like, I don't know, gaming, you could think of it in the gaming space. Like, what are you looking at to track things? What are you looking at when your like opponent is coming at you, or like what is it that you look for when you're building like a team on one of the gaming platforms? Or look at it, and I would start from the framework of like how you look at things, and like maybe whatever your industry is, and then branch out from there, and like what's important to you, like what is it that you want to follow, and then like carry it back over, because that's like how I see things. So I think just like tracking trends, tracking like research aligned with like whatever your industry is, looking at commonalities, like sitting back, observing the daily things that are happening, looking at conversation, how people are interacting, like what things are people interacting, what things are trending more, and things like that. And like I said, not that like things that are trending more are going to like continue like years from now, but and look at history, like look at the past, and like what has happened. Are there patterns? Are there things that are happening that are repeating itself? So I kind of look at a whole bunch of different things. So it'd be hard to like tell everything in a nutshell, but I would say start from like what you're good at or what you know, and then build from there. So I like am very visual, so I visually like chart stuff and make pictures and icons, and then build from there. Um, so I think, if you're really into gaming, like start maybe from like gaming language or gaming things that you do in order to prepare for a game or when you go into a game, and then connect things from there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
makes total sense. You're driving that whole idea notion of take what you know in the game and see how you're even kind of challenging yourself to transfer it out, right?
Yeah.
To see how you can apply that into the real world, right?
Hmm.
And then vice versa. Take what you're learning in the real world and see how you can inform it in your practice, in your gameplay. And
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, I think it's brilliant.
And
Now,
have people observe you as well, like, because
right.
sometimes we like are stuck in our own, we're like, oh no, I do it this way in a certain way, and no, I'm really good at this, and like maybe you really are possibly, but there may be also certain things from the outside looking in that you're maybe really good at, or maybe things you could work on. So have someone like a friend or someone to watch you and like observe, because there are connections in that as well. So
Yep, yep, absolutely. Jourdan, I knew this was going to happen.
I know.
Time will fleet us, and we're like not even fully, we're definitely we're swimming in the deep end here, but we
Yeah.
come back. So if you don't mind, Jourdan, this is the part where I ask all of our special guest speakers to share some words of wisdom to take us home to our community.
Okay. This is a good one. Yeah, I would say, be your biggest fan, because a lot of times we seek outside input in terms of to like cheer us on or whatever it may be. And I think that's great, but we're not always going to have that. And so when you don't have that, like, what else is there? Like, you have to fall back on yourself. So, like, be your biggest fan. And I would also say, develop your personal brand. So for me, like, I'm helping other businesses develop their brand, but I think for me, it's been developing my personal brand along the way as well. And I think that goes so far, especially we look at, things are unpredictable right now and it's super up in the air. You may have gotten your degree in whatever it may be, but you may be shifting into a different field. If you're not able to brand yourself, it's very difficult to make that shift, because you're stuck in like, oh my gosh, I got my degree in this. What am I going to do? So I think if you just like take a step back and just look at your brand from a whole, like, so I think it's important, even though I've shifted and done so many different things, I'm really great about branding myself. So like that anyone that I know or anyone that is like following me on LinkedIn is able to know like, okay, where am I at? What am I doing? All of these things. And it's okay to like change your personal brand along the way because things, happen, you shift. But I think like your personal brand is so important because it's something that follows you and you will always have it. Where like a job I think is great, but you're not, sometimes you may not always have it. And we've seen that with like the pandemic and things that have happened. And so we have to be able to shift because we don't know what's going to come about. But like if you have your personal brand, like that goes with you and you can, shift based on your skill set and align it with wherever you're going.
I love it. Gosh, so true. And again, just speaks so high volumes about being adaptive, right? That's really what, life becomes about, right? The technical problems, yeah, they're easy. It's the adaptive ones that we need to work on. And gosh, I love what you just shared earlier. Be your biggest fan.
Yeah.
So true. That's all you have to fall back on at the end of the day.
True. I'm a great cheerleader for myself. I've learned that because I'm guilty of it. Like I used to be like, oh my gosh, like I thought that was really great what I just like shared or what I just wrote. And then, sometimes like the stuff that you don't think is maybe as great from a personal lens, it just like ends up being really great from like the outside looking in. So like I think if you're your biggest cheerleader, it's not gonna matter like the outside stuff. You just do what you can and like you've done all you can and see what happens. But cheer yourself on along the way.
Gosh, I love it. My goodness. Thank you so much, Jourdan, for
Yeah.
sharing those words of wisdom. And honestly, throughout the whole program, just a lot of great work that you're doing, the Resource Key is doing, and, to the community, the impact that you're making. And I know it takes many hands to do the work and the continuous push for this initiative to keep moving forward so that more brands can start aligning and start thinking differently in the way that puts us in a position where we're all interconnected in that space. Excellent. For everyone else, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Jourdan Saunders. If you would like to check her out, Jourdan, where's a good place to find you?
LinkedIn. I feel like I live there. But you guys, people are like, do you like get off of there? No, but no, seriously, if you want to, like, I will like accept your friend because I know how it is to like start just like getting that first. But LinkedIn is a really great place. You should like definitely start your profile and get on there. And yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Jourdan Saunders, JOURDANSAUNDERS. JOURDAN. I think I left the N off. Anyways, you can see my name here.
Yes.
And then you can also like Twitter, Instagram, the Resource Key. So you can find me there. The Resource Key on LinkedIn. Just the Resource Key and Jourdan Saunders. Just Google and click away. So thank you guys. Thank you for having me. I'm just honored to be here, and yeah, I look forward to coming on again. Maybe maybe we can do a gaming live.
We're gonna have to. We're
like a beginner's version.
Just mentioned some key games that took me back, and I'm thinking Super Mario Brothers, huh?
Like, yeah, you need to do like a gaming for beginner, and your students can teach me how to like get out of my parachute from Fortnite.
There you go. You're definitely invited, Jourdan. And honestly, thank you so much. We're truly excited. And again, we thank you all. And then at the same time, catch us in our next session. We'll be streaming it here. And for everyone else, thank you. Have a great rest of your evening. Take care.